Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Living the Gospel of Life. I'm your host, Leticia Velasquez, and today we're going to start, as always, with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Mary, bright dawn of the new world, Mother of the living, to you do we entrust the cause of life. Look down, O Mother, upon the vast numbers of babies not allowed to be born, of the poor whose lives are made difficult, of men and women who are victims of brutal violence, of the elderly and sick killed by indifference or out of misguided mercy. Grant that all who believe in your Son may proclaim the gospel of life with honesty and love to the people of our time. Obtain for them the grace to accept that gospel as a gift ever new, the joy of celebrating it with gratitude throughout their lives, and the courage to bear witness to it resolutely, in order to build, together with all people of goodwill, the civilization of truth and love, to the praise and glory of God, the Creator and lover of life. Amen. And the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Today's guest is Dawn Eskew, who is a personal friend of mine for many years. We home educated our children together, and she has done some amazing things in the past few years. Dawn is a cradle Catholic. She's the mother of two adult daughters, one of whom is still studying in college, a wife to her husband of 31 years. Her husband's a convert to the faith, and she's a trained chemist. In addition to all the pro-life work I'm about to explain to you, she is a caretaker daughter to our 100-year-old mother. So Dawn and I are part of the sandwich generation, that we have children and parents that we're both caring for. But in her spare time, she was the founder of Personhood Education New York, which is a 501c3, not-for-profit, and she is currently the president of it. She was also the founder of Personhood New York, which is a 501c4, and she holds the office of treasurer. So welcome, Dawn, to the show. You've done quite a lot here with the Personhood Movement.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here.
I would like to know, will you explain to our audience about the Personhood Movement and what it entails? I did explain a little bit a couple of weeks ago, but I want to make sure that if there's a new listener, that they understand what personhood is and why does it exist.
Yes, so personhood exists. Why does it exist? It really was the first strategy when Roe v. Wade came into existence. And the reason is because there was a statement made by Justice Blackmun, who mentioned and talked about the unborn child as a fetus, and said that if the fetus was mentioned as a person in the 14th Amendment, then the case for Roe v. Wade would collapse. From there, those people who were fighting against Roe v. Wade said that personhood should be the strategy and the way back to overturning Roe v. Wade.
So that would be defining the unborn child as a person, because what happens when they're a person? Under law. We know they're a person, obviously, under God, but under U.S. law, the 14th Amendment kicks in.
Right. The 14th Amendment kicks in, and so Justice Blackmun said that the unborn child, or the fetus as he said it, was not defined as a person in the 14th Amendment.
Right, which states in part, no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. In equal protection of the law. So the unborn child would come under that equal protection under the law, under the 14th Amendment. And that's why the idea of personhood is so vital to the pro-life battle against Roe versus Wade.
Right. Now, there are people who argue that Roe v. Wade was decided incorrectly, and that it was a diversion from the 14th Amendment. Last year, 2017, there was an article that came out from the Harvard Journal by a young man, Josh Craddock, who, let's see, the name of the journal is Protecting Prenatal Persons. Does the 14th Amendment prohibit abortion? And that came out in 2017. He studied in Harvard Law School this topic. And in his article, it seems to say that Roe v. Wade diverted from the 14th Amendment. It says that the unborn child was considered persons in some states of the United States and was listed as such in some of the states in their laws as early as the 1800s.
The Supreme Court didn't have standing to take that right away.
Exactly.
The Supreme Court didn't have the right to say, Alabama says this unborn child is a human being and a person under the 14th Amendment. And then it reversed that, and it didn't have, say, since this is a law journal, he's probably only concerned with jurisdiction, right? They didn't have jurisdiction to say that this isn't a person.
Exactly.
Because they did Roe versus Wade, abortion was legal, like in New York and California, and some states had it illegal. So if it were to be overturned, it doesn't mean abortion would be illegal in every state, correct?
Exactly. Then you would still have to go to the states.
Right. And that's why some states like Massachusetts are enshrining abortion in their constitution so that if Roe versus Wade were overturned, they would be safe, quote unquote.
Yes.
And
the same in New York State right now.
New York State, they're doing it now, right?
Yeah, it's right now Cuomo is threatened by this, and the bill is out already in New York State as of 2019, and so they're going to be pushing for that.
And it's the Democrat Senate and House in New York State, correct? So it's got a good chance?
Yes.
Perfect.
So, but we still have to remind our legislators, our leaders, where they are wrong.
Of course.
And so we will be working on that. But anyhow, so that is how the Personhood Movement got started. And now, while I was homeschooling, how I got involved. So while my daughters were in high school of homeschooling, I had some free time because, as you know, you are a homeschooling mother as well. They are a little more independent in teaching themselves,
right.
And so I had some free time.
If you've done a good job by high school, you sort of tell them what they need to do, and they don't need constant supervision.
Right. So
hopefully.
I had
That's
some
the
free
idea,
time.
Anyway.
You're right. So I had some free time, and I was Googling around on the Internet and came across some work that was being done, personhood work that was being done in North Dakota. There was a personhood bill, 2008, and it seemed that there's the House and the Senate, so the House passed a personhood bill.
Wow. And
I had never heard of any anti-abortion bill that would be passing in the United States. And so this piqued my interest. It was I kept following this bill, and when it got to the Senate, it was voted down. But it was around for 3 weeks. And so as a chemist, when you do any kind of research, if there is a blip of success, chemists look at that blip and see, okay, what caused the success, and you work on it to expand it, to make it better.
How can we replicate this?
Exactly. How can you replicate it and make it
better?
Because
it can't happen by accident. A success means something.
Oh, exactly.
And in our case, it means some legislators tripped over the truth for a change. Imagine that.
Right. So I got very excited looking at this, and I kept my eye on the movement, the personhood movement in the United States. And then a couple of years later, well, actually, I am a Catholic. And as a Catholic, my daughters, they finished with the homeschooling, and now I was like, okay, so what am I going to do with myself? What I'm going to explain is how I really got involved with the personhood movement. So when I didn't have the girls to homeschool anymore, I had a lot of downtime, and I got involved with my church, and I got very much involved with what most people know as the Blue Army. It is a Fatima organization today it's known as the World Apostolate of Fatima. Mm-hmm. So I got involved with that in my diocese. I'm on the board still today. A number of us, about 8 people, set up the World Apostolate Division in my diocese. From there, Father Andrew Apostoli he was the spiritual director of the World Apostolate of Fatima at that time. And he came out with a book called Fatima for Today, and in that, he was the one who said that the culture of death today is what is the remnant of communism. And the reason why Our Lady came was to overturn communism, the era of communism. And so I combined the two, the pro-life, which in my mind I had been following the personhood movement, and the mission I was involved with in the Catholic world. And I said, okay, I started to become a little more serious about the pro-life movement. So part of the thing that the World Apostolate of Fatima, what we had to do as board members, and it was to encourage prayer salves, the rosary, and to teach the Fatima message. So every time I have a prayer salve, and every time we're teaching, again, I'm being reminded of fighting the remnant of communism. Sure. Okay? And part of that was the culture of death. So it hit home with me, and then I felt called to doing something more in the pro-life movement. And there came a point in time where finally, after 2 years, I felt this call of doing more for the pro-life. And finally I said, okay, I'm going to call someone, the field director of Personhood, and say, okay, I'm ready to do something more in New York State. Set up a Personhood organization in New York State. And that was Dan Becker. I called Dan Becker, and he said, okay, you got to contact all the pro-life groups. I will be there in 2 months and speak to everybody. So I did that. And, I also, now, I wasn't sure if this was a call, so I told Our Lady, I said, look, I don't know what I'm doing, but if this is a call, I'll make the first step. I'll make the call to Dan Becker, and if nothing happens, it's out of my hands. It's over and done with.
You thought you were safe saying that.
Yeah, I told her, look, you have to be in charge. And if there's something you really want me to do, okay, but you have to lead the way. You've got to hold my hand. I put it all in
2 months to organize everything. That's amazing.
Well, so I did it, and with that first meeting, people started coming out of the woodwork saying, okay, yes, we're on board, yes, we want to do something more. And then Beautiful. I had the people to form the board of the organization.
Beautiful.
So, yep, we got started. I must say, because we're in New York, I could find a pro-life attorney, but I could not find a pro-life attorney who would help set up Personhood, because it is a strategy not everybody is on board with.
Right. And even the pro-life movement is divided on strategy, sadly.
Yes. So I called up Judy Brown, American Life League. I asked her if she knew of an attorney to help us. She directed me to Thomas More Society.
Oh, right.
And that would be Thomas Breca. I spoke with Thomas Breca about our predicament that we were trying to find. I said, please help us. And he said, not only will I help you find an attorney, he said, I will pay the fees to get you set up.
Oh, wow. Well, Mary was definitely the wind behind your sails there. No way.
My goodness.
Our Lady helping
you. Oh, my
Fantastic.
goodness.
All you have to do is say yes. Right, Dawn? The rest is history. Not that there's not a lot of work in between, but it's obvious where your next step is, isn't it?
It's easy to say yes, but then once you say yes, it really is the wildest roller coaster ride.
It is.
And I
that's
don't
why
like
so many
roller
people are
coaster
scared
rides.
of saying yes. They know what happens. I'm another person who said yes. I know that. But it's beautiful, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. But it's definitely a sacrifice and a challenge. And again, it's very gratifying to see, like you said, people come out of the woodwork and pieces fall into place. Free attorneys pop out of nowhere. For our pregnancy center, we actually asked a state legislator who is not of the Catholic faith to do our paperwork. He's like, sure. Never would have seen that.
Oh, that's beautiful.
God is good.
Well, here's an interesting thing. So I am Catholic, but Dan Becker is Baptist.
Oh.
And when I called him, he was the state director at the time. When I called him, he was telling me, okay, you need to read this encyclical, that encyclical, this encyclical.
What?
And he said, do you know them? And I said, yeah, I'm Catholic. Of course I know them.
I love it.
So
he knows the truth of the faith. Isn't that beautiful?
It's amazing how the Holy Spirit works. So the personhood at the national level, there is a personhood organization at the national level called Personhood Alliance. And we have about 21 states involved. Most of them are Protestant. And yet they hold these Catholic values, which is very interesting.
It is.
So anyhow, that's how I got involved. And from there, so what else do you want to know?
Wow, that's quite the story. And anyone who wants to say yes to Our Lady, better watch out, because things will start happening. But it's beautiful. I'm only laughing about it because I know from experience. And it's interesting that Fatima brought you to the pro-life movement. So it's Our Lady's hand. Writing the culture of death, which is communism is a way of looking at people that's very materialistic. People are the means of production. I visited communist countries before the Iron Curtain went down in Eastern Europe, and people were judged by how much good they could do the state. So a person who is weak or disabled or unable to work was of no use to the state. And that brings us to Margaret Sanger and eugenics, because eugenics really was part of the foundation of communism. That people are only worth what they're worth to society, and they're not worth. They don't have intrinsic worth in the eyes of God, as Catholics believe. They're worth, like I had a friend who was a doctor in Poland during the communist days, and he didn't have a nice apartment because, as his brother who made tractors, and everybody knows that tractors are of more use to the government than children's lives. He was a pediatrician. And so you were paid according to what the state found that you were worth. Very interesting. He had a much better apartment because everybody knows tractors are more useful than children. Anyway, so that's how communism led to the materialistic view, which is abortion of the unwanted. And I understand under communism in Russia that women had an average of 7 abortions each. It was terrible. Terrible in Russia. Anyway, so Margaret Sanger was, as the Father Monsignor Ryan called her, the father, or Elsa Dragon, right? The father of modern society. Why don't you discuss that book a little bit we were talking about?
I happened to pick up this book the other night, and I couldn't sleep. I have a cold. You might hear it in my voice, but anyway, I couldn't sleep, and I had this book on the side. I said, well, it's about time I read it. I read it all in one night. Very fascinating. Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist, and she connected with the other eugenicists. There was a group in London, and also
this is back in the turn of the 20th century.
Yes,
about 100 years
beginning
ago,
of the
before. Yeah, beginning of it.
Right, the beginning of the 19th century, and she even liked Hitler's program.
Right.
So this book that I read, it's called Margaret Sanger, Father of Modern Society, by Elisa Drogan, provided a very interesting story and all the resources that backed up what she was saying. And apparently Margaret Sanger was always for abortion. And we know that she was the founder of Planned Parenthood in the United States.
Which originally was called the Birth Control League, and she started in Brooklyn in the, I think, 1910 maybe, or I might be wrong. But originally it was called the Birth Control League, yeah. So
yes.
Ostensibly it wasn't for abortion in the beginning, it was just birth control.
Right, but...
And why was that?
When so she ran in the circles with other eugenicists and had affairs with them. It was like this, her lifestyle. And they told her that she needs to back off on her outspokenness in favor of abortion, because America, the United States, really wasn't ready to hear that. So it would probably be better for her to start off with trying to help people with contraception. So that's why the organization...
Absolutely, because we hadn't even accepted contraception as a society. Every religion condemned contraception until 1930, when the Lambeth Conference in the Church of England accepted for married couples only. It was as scandalous as it could be. You know, we have such widespread acceptance of contraception. Now we don't understand that every single religion condemned it till 1930. So this was before 1930. So not only is she pushing abortion, contraception, she's pushing abortion. She was 2 steps ahead of the game. So she was advised, tone it down, or you're going to just scandalize everybody and we'll never get anywhere. You know, communists are big on strategy, how to win over society, and this was a time when they were taking over Russia and different parts of the world. So they wanted things to go well. These people weren't overt communists, but it was the same materialistic agenda. Eugenics, people are only worth what they're worth in terms of money.
Right. She wanted a stronger race. She was definitely for population control.
As were many Americans. The Rockefellers, there were many Americans. They were very much in favor of that in the turn of the century.
Yes. This book also talks about that as well. So
we can't blame it all on the Germans.
Right.
The Americans were big into eugenics. Eugenics didn't involve death camps for us, but it involved forced sterilization of those considered unfit.
Yes.
So we were behind a lot of this movement to get rid of the unfit, and unfit being those that we deemed genetically inferior. And how do we know they're genetically inferior? Because we hadn't sequenced the human genome yet. We didn't know what a gene looked like. We didn't know they existed. But what we did was that we looked at their lifestyle. Were they poor? Did they have children out of wedlock? Were they criminals? Were they had mental illness? Did they have addictions? And they were considered inferior. Correct? And Margaret Sanger called them human weeds.
Yes, and Margaret did not want federal funding to help the poor.
That's right.
She thought charity was a sin because you're just prolonging a problem that people might have rather than helping them.
Sort of like Ebenezer Scrooge, so let the starving die and decrease the excess population. In other words, let them die out because they don't have the strength to survive. Better that they not be given food. They and their children will die and not produce any further unfit human beings. And that's exactly what many eugenics thought. They didn't express it that baldly, but that was actually the agenda. So she wouldn't have approved of the welfare state and or private charities to help the poor.
Exactly. The other thing is that she, part of it, she wanted to get rid of the black community in the United States.
That's right.
And so this book,
called the Negro Project, and she worked with black pastors to implement it, but she didn't. There's a quote saying, "We don't want the word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population." That was a direct quote.
And it's written in her book. She wrote a book called The Pivot of Civilization. Mm-hmm. All of these, everything we're talking about is documented in her own writing. So we're not making this up.
Nope.
It's documented. And she
never hid it. She never hid it. Yep. Yes, it has been. Because what percent of minorities are killed in abortion? What percentage of abortion clinics are minority neighborhoods? I believe it's 80%.
All of them.
Am I right? Yeah, nearly all of them. Yeah, or close to. Yeah. So that's no mistake. Well, it's not just the cost of the real estate. It's deliberate.
Right. And Brooklyn and Bronx in New York State have the highest rates of abortion. In the Bronx, it's the Hispanic community. In Brooklyn, it's the Black community.
And in fact, I think the Black babies are more likely to be aborted in New York City than born. Am I right?
Yes, that's right. It's out of 3 pregnancies.
Yeah,
3 pregnancies. Yes. So out of 3 pregnancies in the Black community, 2 are aborted. And it has reached, the statistics show that it has reached a genocidal proportion. And genocide became a crime, thanks be to President Ronald Reagan. He drew it up as a crime with the United Nations, and the definition in the United States for genocide, the criteria for it, it has been met within the abortion in the Black community.
So it's a certain percentage of a given race, correct?
It is, well, there's 5 criteria, and abortion in the Black community has met every criteria. It targets a specific group of people. I don't have the 5 criteria in front of me, but I do know it has met it. There's a woman, Katherine Davis, who this is the thing she is fighting through a project called the Restoration Project. And she has gone to Washington, D.C. to say enough is enough.
Good for her.
So it's a crime, and so we're trying to Personhood New York, it has helped her make that awareness with the community here in New York.
Oh, that's wonderful. That she's fighting it, not that this has happened. And the saddest thing is that the genocide involving the mothers of the very children who are unwittingly pushed in that direction of Margaret Sanger's elimination of the weak, because people, and sometimes well-meaning people that might otherwise be involved in charity. A lot of people involved in even Catholic charities believe that abortion is something that's necessary to help empower poor women. That's the ultimate, to me, the ultimate conundrum, the ultimate cognitive dissonance, is that you love somebody enough to help and dedicate your life to helping them, a race of people, but then you tell them that killing their children is a solution to better themselves. That can never be a solution.
No. And that's the fruits of a law like Roe v. Wade, the ugly fruits, is that what has it taught our society? That it is okay, and our youth, they don't know. So one of the things Personhood New York
does... We're allowed to judge somebody's usefulness and their inconvenience in our life. And what has it led to? It's also led to physician-assisted suicide. Because your 100-year-old mother could be convinced, you could be convinced, if you were in a solid Catholic, she's inconvenient. Just as if one of your daughters were pregnant and they weren't married, that we could be convinced that baby's inconvenient. So once, human life can be judged as good or bad, instead of saying all life is a gift, as John Paul says in The Gospel of Life, then you're in very dangerous territory. And any one of us at any time, I'm disabled, any one of us can be judged inconvenient, especially when we are looking at limited resources. So Margaret Sanger was the one who was saying that we can't afford to support people of lower mental abilities, like my daughter with Down syndrome, or the Black community. Certainly would apply to those with mental health. And she also was a racist, so she probably wouldn't think of much of my Italian grandpa and grandma down there in Little Italy, new immigrants.
That's right.
Italy. They're the kind of people she's trying to get rid of. My Polish ancestors down there in New York. Wouldn't think much of Eastern Europeans either. My Irish grandma might have made it because Maggie herself her father were Irish immigrants. But I don't know. She was kind of poor, so maybe not. We forget how close this could have come to us.
Yes.
And so Margaret was the founder of Eugenics, Planned Parenthood, and the very idea that abortion is acceptable. It was slowly through the 20th century, as predicted by Our Lady of Fatima, right, that there were many errors spread by Russia that would poison society. And this utilitarian view of society crept through, even though countries resisted outward communism. Inward communism was affecting the United States. If anyone has seen the documentary A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing on EWTN, I highly recommend it. It talks about the agenda of communism in the United States and how successful it's been, shockingly so, even within, in some cases, the Catholic Church. So, but it definitely has changed the idea that marriage is sacred between a man and a woman, and that sexual intercourse in marriage is sacred and never to be interrupted with contraception. So,
that brings up some of the things that I should mention about personhood. So, yes, so personhood, what we have taken under our wing, besides the pro-life issue, anything that attacks the personhood of a human being, we want to be there to defend the life. So that would involve the embryos, frozen embryos.
Right.
That would also involve or the science that wants to use the frozen embryos for their research. We want to prevent that. That's right. Because we believe that from the moment of conception, there is a human and the personhood is there at that moment. Right. The other thing that we're involved with is fighting assisted suicide. So not only the beginning of life, but also at the end of life. And then in between. So one of the things we've taken under our wing is marriage between one man and one woman. And the reason is because that it is between the marriage between one man and one woman that the child is best protected. Psychology supports that.
Sure.
So that's another area that we are involved with.
Of course, non-controversial, of course. Defending the family.
We are involved with a lot of...
I should know. Sister Lucia said to, I believe it was Cardinal Carafa before he died, that the last battle on earth would be the battle for the family, of Satan on earth.
Yes.
And he's about to lose the battle, for the triumphing Immaculate Heart is against the family. And that includes marriage, of course, and human life, the procreation of human life. And so we are opposing that in what we do because of our faith and because we love God and all He has created is good. And we're grateful for our lives. So let's talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and how Roe versus Wade was an attack on the Constitution.
That's how I view it. I view, when I sit back and I think about this whole agenda, when I think about the beginnings of our country and how we got started, it was a place for people who were running away from persecution for their religion. And so they came to this country for relief of that persecution. And so one of the first things is to the protection of religion, to practice your religion the way you want. So the way I see it, we started out as a country who had a close relationship, or at least wanted to worship God the way they wanted to. There was so our country had a foundation upon God. And then that's where we get our inalienable rights from.
That's right. They're not from the government, they're from God. That's very clearly stated, right? The government cannot take away your right to life. That's why Roe versus Wade is against the Constitution, because, we can say you're not a person and therefore we can kill you. So what's to keep them from saying Italians are not people or people with Down syndrome are not people? Once the unborn baby is not a person, any one of us could lose our personhood.
There you go.
A woman over 100 could be a threat, or a woman with a disability. Anybody can suddenly be inconvenient, and they take their 14th Amendment protection away, and boom, you can be euthanized, as is happening in Canada and in Europe.
There you go. And from there, So Roe v. Wade's been in existence 45 plus years. Mm-hmm. And we have seen little by little chipping away at our rights, little by little. The media, we're not, or taking God out of schools, all of that, so that they can get away with the agenda of, in my mind, it's control. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, it is what the United States was first set up to do, was to remove that control of someone who takes your rights away. So anyway.
Right. A king could say, one day, you're my enemy, you no longer have the right to life, boom, like it happened in many European countries, and you're in the tower with your head chopped off. We try to avoid that and say, no, our rights come from God. Everyone is entitled to due process if they are to be deprived of the right.
And I believe that is the original.
Of course, there's no due process.
Right. And I think that is the core of everything that's going on in our country right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The big battle, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. The biggest battles are for human rights, but first of all, it's the right to life. I mean, people are claiming rights to a job, rights to a living, rights to be called by whatever gender pronoun they want. But if you don't have the right to life, there is no basis for any of that. If you're not alive,
right.
What difference does it make what gender you use or whether or not you receive welfare if you're dead? So this is fundamental to protecting our Constitution and the integrity of the United States. The wealthiest country in the world, we can't afford to allow our citizens to live. Then we're very hypocritical.
And our country claims life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But how can we claim that if we have abortion?
That's right.
We can't. We're hypocrites. So we must, it's got to be one way or the other. But we can't claim life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness if we have government-sanctioned killing of the unborn children. And right now we have the agenda pushing for, at the other end of life, the assisted suicide. So it's got to be one way or the other. We can't have both and claim life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That's right. That's right. So personhood is key to that, to restoring life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
I believe that is the way, yes.
So our government must be made accountable for this great error, and people like Katherine Davis are calling the government to account for picking on her people. She's a woman of color, I presume, and she's standing up for people that are in great numbers dying to abortion.
Right. There are many black leaders who are on board with the Personhood Movement. Yes. The black community identifies with the Personhood Movement because they were not persons.
That's right.
In American history.
Scott discussion in 1853, Dred Scott was deemed to be property, not a person, and therefore his owner, and you can't have an owner if you have personhood, so he had an owner, would consider him nothing more than a sheep or a goat or a plow for
and
that
he could
matter.
Do what he wants. He
Exactly.
could do what he wants with his
him
property.
If he wanted to sell him or whatever, but he had absolutely no rights. And that was a redefinition of personhood when we fought a civil war. And the Emancipation Proclamation, where Abraham Lincoln just said, yes, no, these people they're people under the 14th Amendment. And then it took a while longer for blacks and women to receive the vote, which is full citizenship. But at least they were persons and they could not be killed or sold or enslaved at will. So you think America would have learned from her history not to consider certain class of people because of where they live and how big they are. Really. They live in the womb and they're small, so therefore they're not people? Of course not. That's crazy. It has absolutely no basis.
It's discrimination.
Convenience.
Right, and it is a discrimination.
Absolutely.
People who,
So who are you working with in New York? Who are the people that are fighting the abortion capital distinction there in New York City? Just so everyone knows there's a lot of good happening in New York, despite the government.
So we work, there's the Frederick Douglass Foundation who works with us, and there's also another organization called Am I Not a Child? There are individual people in New York. Personhood in New York. Father Fidelis, yes. We had him as our speaker at our walk, which, by the way, we are doing a walk in New York City. We've done it for 2 years already. We have another one coming up March 25th. It's always on March 25th.
And that's
which
because
is
the feast day
it is the feast day of the Annunciation, but it is also the day designated by John Paul II as the International Day of the Unborn Child.
For that reason.
For that reason, yes. But
our word,
actually,
word
there's another little story.
And among us that day as an unborn child. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And we count that as Christmas time of the incarnation, but no, our Lord was incarnate in his mother's womb for 9 months before he was born. So that's when personhood is that's beautiful. That's when you commemorate personhood in New York. So you've done this now for 2 years?
We've done it for 2 years in a row. What really forced the founding of the walk was that the St. Patrick's Day parade would not accept pro-life or groups to join, to be in their walk. Something. So Elizabeth Rex, who's with Choose Life license plate, and she was very outspoken about it, but we kind of worked on this together and said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And so we both kind of said, okay, we're going to do a walk in New York City. It's going to be our own walk if they won't let us be part of it. Yeah. So the name of our walk is called the International Gift of Life Walk, and it will always be on March 25th, and it will always be in Foley Square. Okay. So we're doing it this year, 2019. We have Dr. Alveda King joining us.
Wow, great speaker.
We also have Nick Loeb. He is an actor, and he is the director. Yep, he is the director of a new movie coming out called Roe v. Wade.
Oh, and I've heard about that, yes.
Yep. He contacted Personhood New York and asked if he could speak at the walk. And I said, absolutely.
Well, who would argue with that? Yeah.
So he will be there, and we're going to have some other speakers.
Sounds like
we're working on it.
Lineup. I hope I can make it. That's
that would be
it's
great.
Not in January. I mean, I didn't know pro-lifers did March in another month other than January. That's great. You might actually have some good weather. Who knows?
Well, we hope so. So anyway, that weekend, so March 25th is on a Monday. We're doing our walk. But on Saturday, prior to our walk, we are having a conference.
Oh.
And
23rd.
We will,
March 23rd.
On March 23rd, it will be in downtown Manhattan at the Ayula Center. It is attached to the Old St. Patrick's Basilica.
Spell that, please.
So we're having a conference. A-U-L-A.
Ayula Center, Old St. Patrick's. Yes. And the address?
Oh, I don't have that offhand. I gotta Google it.
No problem. Yep. Old St. Patrick's Cathedral, because not all of us are New Yorkers, but we might want to go.
Old St. Patrick's Basilica, which is downtown Manhattan on, I can't think of the name of the very famous. It's in Little Italy. It's right off of Little Italy.
It's 260-264 Mulberry Street. Where else could it be?
Mulberry Street.
Where my Nana was born. Maybe it's down this. Maybe that was her church. She's gone now, but she was born on Mulberry Street. How do you like that?
Yes.
Between Prince and Houston Street in the Nolita neighborhood of Manhattan. Beautiful. Yes. I just saw it. And so it's from 1815. It's the original St. Patrick's.
So you can get all that information on our website. Yep, it's on our website.
And that is?
Personhood Education, the letter N as in Nancy and the letter Y as in yellow.com. So it's personhoodny.com.
Great. Well, that sounds like a great conference. And you'll give me a link, and I'll put it up on the show website, Living the Gospel of Life website on WCAT, and we'll make sure that we keep that up there so that our listeners, they're from around the world, but those that are nearby could certainly go. Maybe they can't make the March for Life. Maybe they don't like marching in January. They could certainly come and to support you. That would be fantastic. So what's the purpose of education, Dawn? You're also the head of the Personhood Education. So you're not just a political activist organizing marches and conferences and legislative action, but you're also head of the education arm of Personhood.
Yes.
What is your aim?
Okay. Well, believe it or not, many people do not know when we become human. And I'm specifically talking about the youth. They don't. So, and also about when we become a person. So we have a program called the Pillars of Personhood, and we have large banners, which is part of it's an educational tool. And so we teach them when we are human, and it's science that teaches that at the moment of conception, all the DNA is there, and that makes us human. And then from there, so we have a banner which has pictures from the moment of conception, the different stages of human development, and then the last picture is an elderly woman in a wheelchair or in bed. Mm-hmm. And so we have a program where we're teaching academically, and then we go to the banners, and then we go.
And we're very visual. We're a very visual society, so those pictures can really change hearts. I remember seeing a young lady, a Mexican young lady, down to the Watch for Life, and what she remembered most were the pictures.
Yes. So we have the banners are like 10 feet by 10 feet big.
Wow. And
we have 4 of them. The first banner has the stages of human development, and then the second banner talks about science, talks about transhumanism. The third banner talks about circumstances. Should the circumstances of a person's birth determine whether they can be aborted or not? And one of the circumstances is the rape exceptions. Mm-hmm. So we have Rebecca Kiesling, who is very outspoken. Mm-hmm. She's on board with Personhood.
She was conceived in rape. Mm-hmm.
She was conceived in rape. And so her picture is up there on the banner. And then the fourth banner shows the ugliness of when a human is not considered a person. The banner, that fourth banner, is graphic. Mm-hmm. It shows pictures of the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. It shows a picture of a KKK lynching, and the last picture is a graphic picture of an aborted fetus. Mm-hmm. So when we go in public, it is in a campus, Catholic campus. Mm-hmm. When we go to, say, the Capitol, if it's someplace more public, mm-hmm. That picture is not so out there, that last graphic picture. Mm-hmm. We don't hide it, but it is kind of protected where we can forewarn people. So after they go through the first 3 banners, when they come to the fourth one, we forewarn them. It is graphic, but it hits the whole personhood mission home. That mm-hmm. This is what happens when human beings are not called persons. They're killed.
That's right. As we discussed, the Dred Scott case and how horribly blacks were treated even after they were given full legal rights. They still weren't respected in many places, and they were in fear of their lives up until and even after the Civil Rights Movement. It's a long struggle to change hearts and minds of a population that is accustomed to thinking, well, these people don't matter. These people don't count. I can do what I want with these people.
So if the United States has already made a decision on personhood for the black community, then, hello?
No longer be.
So as you were saying, Dawn, it's essential to educate the public that just because something's legal, it doesn't make it right or even constitutional. I've heard many a constitutional scholar, some of whom are not even pro-life, say that Roe versus Wade is poorly decided. It's the worst decision of the Supreme Court because it goes against the 14th Amendment. And just because something is a Supreme Court decision doesn't mean it's not reversible. Thank heavens we reversed Roe versus Wade and Brown versus the Board of Ed. Thank God there's a lot of the Supreme Court decisions that we came to our senses afterwards and we changed. And Buck versus Bell, where the sterilization of a woman because she had an illegitimate child was considered proper. That's a real Margaret Sanger decision in the early 20th century that we're very ashamed of. So Roe versus Wade, we believe, will go down as one of the mistakes of the Supreme Court, regardless of how long it's been around, correct?
That's right. That's right. And we need to continue to educate our community because laws can teach, or they do teach society.
Sure.
And when there is a bad law, we need to correct and educate what the truth is. So if we educate our community to the truth, we can still make abortion unthinkable, no matter what the law says, or no matter what the law will allow. We can still have a more loving society, one that respects all human beings, no matter what the creed, color, size, or living conditions.
That's right.
So it's most important to educate. That's the bottom. That's the foundation of the whole personhood.
Well, I've heard it said that politics is downstream from culture. As we change the hearts and minds, then it'll be easier to change the politics, because politicians are not known for having spines, as you know, and they don't want to be out there on an issue. They want to feel like they are fulfilling the will of their constituents and basically that they'll get reelected. So if the public makes it clear, and as you know, the majority of Americans, when they're educated on what Roe versus Wade permits, are horrified. The majority of Americans do not approve of abortion throughout all 9 months. They just don't.
Right.
Only a small percentage of Americans approve abortion even past 12 weeks. And we're one of only 4 countries in the world that permits abortion throughout all 9 months.
Yeah.
We're up there with China, North Korea, and Canada.
Exactly.
And that's not very good
interesting enough, the World Health Organization came out with a study that said Ireland, prior to legalizing of abortion recently in Ireland, that it was the safest place to have a baby in the world because of the mortality rates. And the United States,
maternal mortality, not just fetal mortality, of course, but maternal mortality. Because abortion hurts women's bodies. It's not good for women. They normally survive it, not always, but the baby never survives it, but almost never. But it hurts women's bodies. It creates premature birth. It can cause a woman to become infertile by destroying the integrity of her uterus. And there are many other complications of abortion. It's not our purpose to go through it now, but we must understand that abortion is not pro-women.
No,
it's the act of a woman who feels that she has no other choice. From working in pregnancy centers, I can tell you that most of the women who have come to us are grateful that they're offered a choice. They felt as though they had no choice for various reasons, not all of them financial. A lot of them are just emotional pressure. From the father of the child, their mother. One woman had an employer. Oh, he's a new employer. What is he going to think if I have a baby? Like, what are you letting that new employer determine your life for? You know, it's crazy. But the pressure that women feel, and women are very sensitive to pressure. We can often respond to it very intuitively and not even know why we're feeling pressured. And most of the women I saw in my pregnancy center, they did not freely choose abortion. They felt that it was their last alternative. And they were grateful for a chance to say, no, you know what? I'm not doing this. So they were able to take a stand. And you say also that in the United States we have a foundation based on Judeo-Christian thinking and ethics and a vision of the world where every human being is made in the image and likeness of God.
Yes.
And because of that, we have a unique, because each and every human being has made in the image of likeness of God, they have a special purpose in life.
Yes.
But on January 22nd, 1973, the U.S. Constitution was hijacked. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's up to us. And we will be remembered, I hope, this generation that is living now will be remembered as the abolitionists of the future. I live in a town where a brave young woman, after slavery was abolished, started a women's college, a women's school, and had one black student. And there was such a horrible reaction in the town, she decided, well, I guess they don't want me to have black and white girls together. I'll just have black girls. And it got worse. They tried to burn down her home. Prudence Crandall is now a folk hero with her statue with her black student in the capital of Hartford. But yet at the time, she was basically run out of Canterbury, my hometown, on a rail, and had to go move to Ohio, where I guess she found people that were a little more open-minded. And very, very sad. Okay, but so very often pro-lifers in this day and age, especially in the Northeast and the West Coast, are treated similarly. What was it that Governor Cuomo said about pro-lifers in the New York legislature?
Oh my goodness, we don't. Pro-lifers do not belong living in New York.
You can't even live in the state. Well, I'm sure Governor Malloy would have said something similar in Connecticut, and Governor Lamont will say something similar. They're literally trying to take away our rights to be full participating citizens.
There you go.
So there we go. Our personhood, our
all because of abortion.
Right, because we disagree on one of the most fundamental issues of our time. So, someday we'll be heroes. Right now we're vilified, and we accept that as Christians, that sometimes in this life Christ doesn't seem to triumph. But guess who wins in the end, right? We can always rest on that assumption. But he didn't promise us that we'd get anything other than what? The cross. And boy, that promise is certainly coming true. So it's very important to remember that the pro-life fight is worth having regardless of the opposition. And the saddest thing is sometimes it can happen even within the pro-life movement. There can be disagreements about strategies, and Dawn laughs because she knows the personhood movement is actually considered controversial, unbelievably, because there are different approaches.
But before we end our interview, I want to make sure that we also add the element of prayer. Prayer is so important. Personhood is faith-based and Christ-centered. So we know that we need prayers for this movement to move forward.
Absolutely. And I promise you that I will pray for you, and I would like my listeners to also promise. You could go to my Facebook page, Living the Gospel of Life on WCAT, and offer to pray, and wouldn't hurt to donate. I will put a link to your organizations there to pray.
That would be wonderful.
We will never know until we are in eternal life how much good our prayers have brought on this earth, and we only have now to do it. So I'm going to end with Henry Hyde's meditation. I don't know if you've heard this, that when a person dies, have you ever heard his meditation?
No.
It's something that you should hear about unborn babies pleading for us.
All right.
So I have it right here. I just want to get it right. Henry Hyde was known for his pro-life efforts. He died at age 83, and he left a lasting pro-life legacy. And he says, when we die and we are alone before God, there is no one to blame, right, for anything that we might have done wrong. So he talks about this moment that we will all appear before Christ when we die for judgment. And he says, quote, when the time comes, as it surely will, and we will face the awesome moment, the final judgment, I've often thought, as Fulton Sheen wrote, that it's a terrible moment of loneliness. You'll have no advocates. You're alone standing before God, and a terror will rip through your soul like nothing you can imagine. But I really think that those in the pro-life movement will not be alone. I think there'll be a chorus of voices that have never been heard in this world, but are heard beautifully and clearly in the next world. And they will plead for everyone who has been in this movement. They will say to God, spare him because he loved us. Thank you, Dawn, of Personhood. Personhood Alliance, is it? I'm sorry, Personhood New York?
Personhood New York, but we are with Personhood Alliance at the national level.
Our chapter of Personhood Alliance. Thank you for being our guest today. I hope you will come back and let us know how that march and conference go, and that many of our listeners can join you. God bless you.
Thank you so much for coming. God bless you too. Bye-bye.
And thank you for listening to Living the Gospel of Life.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.